Before we start, please make sure to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends and family. Also, can you please tell me where and what time you're watching? Thanks. I used to love my job as a watchman at a wind farm. My main responsibility was to make rounds a few times a night to ensure no one was tampering with the turbines. Most nights, I'd read books, and when that got old, I'd bring my portable DVD player and watch movies. The patrols were the only things that broke up the monotony. I'd arrive at 9 p.m. and get relieved by the day shift at 9 a.m. It was a simple routine. I'd pull up next to the watchman I was relieving. We'd exchange pleasantries, and he'd let me know if anything happened during the day. It was usually nothing more than spotting deer or maybe a bear. There were a dozen wind turbines spread over 5 miles, all connected by dirt roads. When I started, I'd check the locks on the doors of each turbine. 5 years in, I barely glanced at them. Most times, I'd still be watching a movie while driving. Traffic was non-existent on those roads. I only drove into a ditch once, and getting out wasn't too hard. The worst part was the embarrassment. One evening, I was in a rush and running late. Something nagged at me as I sped to the site, but I shook it off. I arrived just in time, got the report from the other watchman, and settled into my routine. My first round was uneventful. Twilight had faded into the deep darkness of night. Clouds had been gathering all evening, and I saw a flock of turkeys cross the road near a field, definitely a sign of an incoming storm. Nothing else was stirring, though, not even the usual animals. Maybe they were already hunkering down. The 5-mile dirt road loop took about 30 minutes to complete. We weren't allowed to drive too fast, and technically we were supposed to check each turbine door. Most of us just timed it to make it look like we checked. After finishing the round, I returned to the main building, pulled out my DVD player, and started watching Die Hard. Naturally, I fell asleep. I woke up to the credits rolling. "Damn," I muttered, realizing I'd missed my round. I jumped into the car and sped off to the turbines. That's when I remembered what had been nagging at me earlier, a flashing low fuel light. I cursed myself for not filling up yesterday. It's just my second round, I thought. I should have enough to last the night and make it to a gas station in the morning. I clung to that hope all night. My second round was just as uneventful, though I couldn't stop glancing at the fuel gauge. Driving off the job wasn't an option. Getting caught meant instant termination. As tempting as a quick trip to the gas station was, I stayed put. My boss was the real issue. He was known for random inspections at odd hours, pretending he was just checking in to see if I needed anything. If he showed up, I figured I'd ask him for a couple of gallons of gas. Maybe that would keep him off my back for a while. During my second movie, Die Hard 2, the rain started. At first, it was light, just enough to fog up my windows. My defroster wasn't working well, which made things frustrating. By my fourth round, the rain had turned into a full-blown downpour. It was so intense I could barely see a few feet ahead. Driving slowly was my only option. The dirt road had turned into a mess, with deep ruts and large puddles in the low spots. I was grateful for the Jeep as I navigated through. Right in the middle of one massive puddle, my engine sputtered and died. I cranked the ignition over and over, but it was no use. I was out of gas. I sat there, drenched in disbelief. There was no way I was going to live this down. I could already imagine it. 5 years from now, the other guy would still be telling the story about the fool who ran out of gas in the middle of a rainstorm. Now, I had a choice to make. Stay in the car and ride out the storm, or walk back to the main building and wait for the day shift. I checked my watch. Nearly 8 hours until my relief arrived. With the rain coming down like it was, walking back wasn't an option. If there had been an emergency gas can, I might have thought about it, but that hadn't been refilled in forever. Thanks to my genius boss, who said it was a waste of gas to let it sit unused. Apparently, the concept of emergency wasn't in his vocabulary. I decided not to drain my battery by watching another movie. Instead, I sat and listened to the rain pounding on the roof, sounding like marbles dropping from the sky. That's when my imagination started acting up, probably out of sheer boredom. I was whistling some tune, off key of course, when I glanced in the rearview mirror. For a split second, I thought I saw eyes staring at me through the back window. My heart jumped, and I whipped around so fast my neck cracked. Nothing was there. Still, I hit the door lock button, as if that would do much good in the middle of nowhere during a downpour. My whistling got louder and more off-key as I avoided looking in the mirror again. But it was no use. My eyes kept getting drawn to it like a magnet. When I finally looked, there was nothing. I laughed nervously at my own paranoia and leaned back against the headrest. I don't remember falling asleep, but I do remember waking up. Something was wrong. The rain had stopped, and so had every other sound. No animals, no crickets, nothing. The silence was eerie. I cracked the window and listened, but there was still nothing. Even the wind turbines weren't moving. I glanced at the nearest one, and its blades were completely still. It was rare for the wind to be so calm that the blades wouldn't turn at all. Checking my watch, I realized I had been asleep for 4 hours. The storm clouds were gone, leaving the moon to light up the sky. It wasn't quite full, but bright enough to cast shadows from the trees around me. The night was beautiful, the kind that made me glad to live in rural Pennsylvania. It also made me rethink sitting in the Jeep until morning. My mind wrestled with the decision as I hummed a tune, debating whether to stay or go. I looked at my watch again, just under 4 hours until my relief showed up. It would be easier to explain things if I walked to the gate and waited for him, rather than letting him find me stranded in the middle of the road. Decision made, I grabbed the flashlight from the glove box. My eyes lingered on the handgun beside it. After a moment's hesitation, I left it behind. Most animals around here avoided humans, and the others could be scared off with noise. I stepped out of the Jeep, and my foot immediately sank into a deep puddle. Water oozed past my ankle, soaking my sneaker. The puddle surrounded the entire car, easily 12 feet wide. Resigned, I stepped in with my other foot, sighing as water seeped into both shoes. I sloshed through the puddle to the far side and found dry land. Shining my flashlight at the nearest turbine, I saw the number 5 on its base. That was the farthest one from the gate, right at the halfway point of the loop. It didn't matter if I went forward or back, the distance was the same. I decided to move forward and started my trek. For the first part of the walk, the only sound was the squishing of my shoes. It was unnerving, having silence and hundreds of shadows as my only company. When I aimed the flashlight into the trees, countless pairs of eyes glinted back at me. They stayed silent, watching as though they were spectators at some strange event. The woods felt like the pews of a silent church, with me walking up the aisle and the eyes around me watching like a quiet congregation. They varied in size from small and beady to unnervingly large, but none of them made a sound. Were they truly afraid of me? I paused for a moment to catch my breath, and that's when I heard it. A footstep behind me. It wasn't a loud thud, it was the soft, wet squish of grass under a large foot. My heart leapt as I spun around, shining my flashlight toward the sound. Nothing. I swept the beam across the trees and gravel road, searching for movement, but all I saw was an empty, endless forest. Somehow, the absence of anything was worse than seeing a deer, a bear, or even a coyote. Something I could scare away or fight off. Instead, the void filled with horrifying possibilities my imagination conjured. The oppressive silence continued as I quickened my pace, the squishing of my soaked shoes now deafening in the stillness. My thoughts shifted to my destination. I considered cutting through the woods to save time, but that idea was quickly dismissed, if it were daylight maybe. But in the dead of night, with the nearly full moon casting twisted shadows all around, it wasn't worth the risk. I thought about whistling to calm my nerves. I picked the happiest tune I could think of, but the sound that echoed back was distorted, warped, like the eerie lullabies in horror movies. I stopped almost as soon as I started. I was halfway through a verse when my breath caught, and I froze. Another footstep sounded behind me. This time, when I turned and aimed my flashlight, I didn't find nothing. A pair of large, glowing red eyes stared back at me from behind a tree. They were set far too high off the ground, at least 8 feet up. My breath hitched as I realized whatever owned those eyes wasn't small. It stood 40 or 50 yards away, partially obscured by the tree, but I could feel its gaze burning into me. Those eyes will haunt me for the rest of my life, however long that might be. My logical brain had no time to weigh options or strategize. Instead, I did the only thing I could. I ran. I ran like the devil himself was on my heels. To my surprise, I managed to keep hold of my flashlight as I bolted. Desperation pushed me to speeds I never thought I could reach. The sound of footfalls behind me grew louder. My heart sank. It was catching up, closing the distance with every step. My mind scrambled for any solution, any escape. Just as panic threatened to overwhelm me, salvation appeared. One of the wind turbines stood ahead, towering like a lighthouse for a lost sailor. I remembered the emergency keypad on the door. If I could make it inside, I might stand a chance. Adrenaline surged through me and I pushed myself even harder, feeling like a cartoon character leaving a trail of smoke in their wake. But reality crushed my brief illusion of escape. The creature behind me no longer cared about stealth. Its heavy footfalls thundered on the gravel road, impossibly close. I resisted the overwhelming urge to look back, knowing that stumbling in my panic would be a death sentence. The massive turbine loomed larger with each step, its 400-foot structure casting an imposing shadow. My focus zeroed in on the keypad by the door. I had one shot to type in the code before it reached me. As I neared the door, sheer terror gripped me. Panic clouded my thoughts, convincing me that I'd be caught at any moment. Then, without thinking, I did something purely out of desperation. I threw my flashlight backward, hoping for a miracle. To my astonishment, I heard a muffled thud and a low, guttural groan. The sounds were far too close for comfort, but they bought me precious seconds. I refused to look back. Instead, I lunged for the turbine door, my fingers fumbling for the keypad as my heart pounded like a drum in my chest. I punched in the code and yanked the heavy door open, straining my arms against its weight. No sooner had I stepped inside than I pulled the door shut with all my might. Just before it latched, a set of massive fingers appeared in the doorway. Panic surged through me as I pulled harder, every muscle in my body straining to the point of breaking. The door, impossibly, continued its momentum toward closing. The monstrous fingers were caught between the door and the frame, and with a sickening slam, they disappeared. An inhuman howl erupted from the other side, reverberating through the metal walls as I finally locked the door and collapsed to the floor. Gasping for air, I couldn't stop my mind from replaying the horrifying image of those fingers. It was like my brain was stuck on repeat, showing me every awful detail. The fingers, the size of bratwursts, covered in brown hair and tipped with thick claw-like nails. I lay there, panting and trying to make sense of what had just happened. For now, I felt safe. But how long would it last? Would anyone even come looking for me, or would they assume I'd wandered off into the woods? And the question that loomed largest of all, what the hell was that thing? I didn't want to speculate. The possible answers were too terrifying to entertain, especially knowing it was still out there, somewhere close. Just as my adrenaline began to fade, a deafening pounding rattled the door. The sound echoed up through the hollow metallic chamber that was both my salvation and my prison. My heart raced again as I scrambled to my feet, unsure of what to do. My only way out led straight into the claws of that monster. I looked around the small room, desperately searching for a plan. It wasn't much, just a 10-foot wide space with smooth metal walls and a single ladder bolted to the side. The ladder stretched upward, disappearing into the darkness above. Thankfully, there were small lights spaced every few feet, illuminating the climb, but that offered little comfort. My options were bleak. I could wait here for the door to fail, or I could climb. A straight, grueling ascent with no rest stops, no second chances. The idea of climbing was daunting. If I didn't make it all the way up, I'd have to climb back down only to end up right where I started. Another earth-shaking thud at the door made the decision for me. I approached the ladder, placing my foot on the first rung tentatively, as if testing its strength. When it held, I moved to the second rung, then the third. But on the fourth rung, disaster nearly struck. My wet shoes slipped and I fell back to the floor, landing with a splash in a small puddle. Pain shot through my body, a reminder of the soaking I'd taken outside. Though the ladder rungs had grip pads, my soggy sneakers made them treacherous. I resolved to step with the arch of my foot instead of the ball. After checking for injuries, nothing but a few bruises and a bruised ego, I stood up again. The pounding at the door resumed, more insistent now. My heart pounded in rhythm with the relentless thuds as I started climbing once more, this time more carefully. I climbed slowly at first, testing each foothold before moving to the next rung. But as I grew more confident, I quickened my pace. My breathing turned ragged, the exertion sapping what little energy I had. I cursed myself for skipping dinner and ignoring my snacks earlier in the night. Pausing to catch my breath, I hooked an arm around the ladder for support. That's when I made two critical mistakes. First, I looked up. The climb seemed endless, the top no closer than when I'd started. Second, I looked down. Far below, the ground gaped like a death trap. If I fell now, there was no surviving it. And then I saw something else below me, a row of safety harnesses hanging neatly on the wall. A metal cable ran alongside the ladder, clearly designed for climbers to clip in for safety. For a moment, I considered going back down to grab one. But I knew the truth. I didn't have the energy for another climb. The rest of the ascent felt like an eternity. I stopped frequently, my breaks growing longer each time. My feet screamed in protest, each step an agony. The last rungs of the ladder were the hardest, each step more grueling than the last. But when I looked up and saw the top of the ladder within reach, a surge of excitement carried me forward. I scrambled onto the metal landing and collapsed, gasping for air, my muscles screaming in protest. For what felt like an eternity, I lay there, letting my strength slowly return. When I finally stood, I stepped through the door into the cramped generator room. The space was dominated by massive machinery, leaving only a narrow walkway and a small hatch that opened to the outside. As I scanned the room, I spotted a safety rig hanging on the wall. Wasting no time, I strapped it on and secured the line to a hook. With a deep breath, I opened the hatch. The dawn had broken, painting the world in a brilliant orange glow. For a moment, the sheer beauty of it took my breath away, distracting me from the chaos of the night. Then, the wind, which had been still after the storm, surged against me with alarming force. I stumbled, grateful for the safety line as I watched one of the turbine's massive blades sweep past, just feet away. Despite my fear, I leaned cautiously over the edge, fighting the vertigo induced by the towering height. I scanned the ground below, searching for any sign of the creature. The tiny trees swayed peacefully in the breeze, and for a moment I thought it was gone, but then I saw it. The creature emerged from behind the turbine base. From this height it looked almost small, but its presence was no less chilling. It was still there, still hunting. I stepped back inside, trying to think of a plan. After a frantic search, I found a radio among the wall controls. Pressing one of the buttons, I inadvertently triggered an alarm that blared through the structure. Hastily, I silenced it and tried another button. "Hello? Hello? Can anyone hear me?" I said into the microphone. At first, there was only static. Then, on the third attempt, my boss's voice crackled through. "What the hell are you doing in one of the units?" It was an emergency," I stammered. "I needed to contact someone." He muttered something under his breath. "What kind of emergency?" "I'd rather not say on the radio," I replied. "Can you come get me?" "Which unit are you in?" "Number 6, I said. "It'll be a while," he grumbled. "How long is a while?" "Like, when I get there." The line went back to static, but at least someone knew where I was. Relief washed over me, briefly. Curiosity got the better of me, and I climbed back outside. Peeking over the edge again, I froze. The creature was looking up at me. Its glowing eyes locked onto mine, and then it did something that turned my stomach to ice. It started climbing the turbine. My brain screamed at my body to move, but I was frozen. unable to look away from the horrible sight. It climbed with unnatural ease, claws finding purchase on the smooth surface. When it was halfway up, my instincts finally kicked in. I scrambled back inside, slamming the hatch shut and unfastening the safety line. Without thinking, I bolted for the ladder. The descent was a blur. I slipped several times, nearly plummeting to my death, but sheer panic kept me moving. The pounding on the turbine above grew louder, reverberating through the hollow structure. When I reached the bottom, I paused to catch my breath. That's when I noticed the faint smell of smoke. Looking up, I saw black plumes pouring from the turbine. I didn't wait to see what was happening. I opened the door as quietly as possible, hoping the noise above would mask my exit. A few brown hairs fell to the ground, and I hastily stuffed them into my pocket. As I stepped outside, the door creaked ever so slightly. The noise above stopped. I froze, heart pounding in my ears. The acrid smell of smoke grew stronger, and a deafening roar shattered the silence. I ran. The world blurred as I sprinted back toward my Jeep, refusing to look back. I nearly collided with my boss's car as it rounded the corner. "What the hell?" he shouted, getting out. "Look." I pointed toward the turbine. What am I supposed to be seeing, other than millions of dollars going up in smoke? I stopped mid-sentence. The creature was gone. I jumped into his car and slammed the door. "Can we go, please?" He gave me a long, suspicious look before getting in and driving back to the main building. The entire ride, I kept glancing over my shoulder, expecting to see those glowing eyes in the trees. When we arrived, my boss pointed toward his office. "You're going to have to answer some questions." "I know." "Want me to send someone to get your car?" "Sure, thanks." I avoided his office, heading straight for the break room. After a coworker woke me hours later with my keys, I decided I wasn't staying. I took one last look at the boss's office, then turned and walked out the door. The next day, I read in the paper about the turbine fire. Officials claimed a bear had somehow gotten trapped inside, causing the blaze. But I knew the truth. I found a group that specialized in unexplained phenomena. With the 3 brown hairs in my pocket, I walked into their office, ready to tell my story.